Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and in my never-ending quest to fist the entire world with every build possible, I have moved on to Doryani's Fist, and this build is designed to basically go for the biggest possible crits, the biggest possible one-shots, since it's got so much front-loaded damage, and it is a fairly slow attack. The idea is to get lots and lots of crit multi, stack some flat damage, and then lots of shock effect as well, or at least some shock effect, and up to 60% more shock with the new notable from the cluster jewels, and then be an Inquisitor, go for crit, and see if we can get the biggest possible shocks. The result is rather substantial shocks, or hits, up to about 2 million damage at the moment, and you'll see the little boss fights that I've done so far a little bit later on, but it's actually working out quite well. It is surprisingly good nowadays because last patch or last major update, they did include Doryani's Fist to have a bit more attack speed than before, because it was a very slow attacking skill, and it's still pretty damn slow attacking, but it is far more manageable these days, so it's actually not the worst playstyle in the world anymore. And the goal is to hopefully start shocking and fisting the endgame content, the Shapers of the world, the Uber Elders, the Awakeners, and hopefully get really big single target chonks going in. So far, every boss fight I've come across has been pretty smooth and has looked something like that. It's mostly been the clear that has been more of an issue than anything, and that comes into the fact that there is a target hit limit, I do believe. At least that's what it feels like. These days, when you're going against a lot of the content out there, Double Beyond, Delirium, Sextants, all kinds of nonsense, you're getting so many monsters out there that it is capable of hitting the target hit limit on some skills like a Doryani's Fist or a Discharge. It's not something that's too big of an issue at the moment anyway, but it is something that is holding this sort of character back from true one screen, one shot greatness. Overall, it's still been totally fine. I just probably shouldn't engage too much with the beefiest of the beefiest content, even though it's totally doable, and I haven't really been dying on this character almost at all. It's just not feeling the smoothest, as opposed to content that you just one-shot and move on. Something like Delve, for example, for most of the time, if there aren't too many monsters or too many packs, you can just one-shot a lot of the screen and then keep on moving. And that's how the playstyle, I think, should be, whereas when you got to keep attacking in one spot, and stuff keeps spawning or stuff keeps running in, it might get a bit clumsy, since we are a fairly slow attacking character still. But as you can see, we have got the attack speed up to respectable amounts, where the biggest drawback of the item, the slow attack speed, shouldn't impact us too much. Now, a lot of that is thanks to the new Warcry clusters that let us sustain good rage, as well as sustaining Berserk throughout a lot of tough encounters. With the current Warcry clusters I have up, Berserk can go 10 or more seconds, which is pretty smooth and handy. One of the semi-large issues with this is, though, that since we are a crit build, we have to use Rigworld's Talisman, which is a talisman that's corrupted already, so you can't anoint instant Warcry on this build unless you use some Blight Uniques, and I ended up deciding that wasn't really worth doing, so we don't have instant Warcry. So it is a little bit less fluid, less smooth than other instant Warcry builds like I did just previously, but it still works and hasn't been the biggest issue thus far. But as you can see, there are lots of high rolls and low rolls on a lot of lightning damage like this. So your lightning damage can be somewhat small, but it can be ginormous. And as well as that, we are using Ruthless. So 1 in 3 hits is going to be the biggest thing you've ever seen. And the other hits are going to be, well, still pretty big, but not necessarily the biggest. So with the 20% lightning damage to cold from a couple of the clusters as well, you can see that we're going to be freezing a lot of bosses out there, even with only 20% cold damage. But it's come into play pretty nicely so far, and I do want to show you guys how I've built so far. Hopefully in the next video I'll show some real endgame smashing. So here's our current character, level 89, Unhinged Door, Inquisitor, unhinged, unchained, unhinged door. I don't know. It all kind of makes sense, but don't think about it too hard. There are some pretty interesting, fancy things going on in this build, so there's probably a bit to cover here. As I mentioned, Doryani's Fist, that's the item we are using. It's 220 to 600 lightning damage to unarmed attacks, as well as spells. Bit of damage there, but we are focusing on the attack portion, and it grants Doryani's Touch skill, which is the sort of Dominus attack, Touch of God, and it means you can put 4 support gems in here for a 4 link, technically a 5 link then, and this is what the attack looks like. Just one of those. That's with an increased area, with a pulverize in there as well. It gets rather substantial on area, but the problem with a pulverize is it does lessen your attack speed and it does feel a bit clumsy while mapping. So currently what I'm rolling with is increased area, LE damage with attacks, fortify, and ruthless support for the really big one-shots and shocks. And then I've got a conk effect to sub in and a crit strikes occasionally as well. Now the actual skill itself has 600% damage effectiveness, which means any additional lightning damage is going to be absolutely huge for you. And as well as that, it's also got hits can't be evaded. So you got a 100% chance to hit, which means being blinded doesn't mean shit for us. And that's why we've also tried to utilize the Brutal Restraint that gives us second sight. You are blind, doesn't affect our light radius, but 25% more melee critical strike chance while blinded. Since we don't have any negative repercussions from blind, it's just 25% more melee crit strike chance. But that means that our shield charge and our totem won't really be doing anything. Totem is there just purely for additional damage buff, and then shield charge is there just for charging around and moving a bit, as opposed to proccing fortify. So that's why we have fortify over here. But in a world where I'm trying to get the biggest possible crits and one shots, you kind of want a reliable crit chance. So at the end of the day, we do have damn near 100% crit chance while Diamond Flask is up. So that's kind of the idea of stacking crit there, because with the Rigwald's Talisman, you get 7 base crit to unarmed, and you're then treated as claws for a few certain scalings. And like I said, can't anoint on that, so that is a bit annoying. But our passive tree then goes out of its way to get a bit of crit over here, a bit of crit down here, but most of our crit is currently coming from these Warcry jewels. So we're using Warning Calls, 4 of them, which is 50 crit, 35 melee crit multi if we've Warcried recently, and we have pretty much always. So that's the idea there, getting 4 of those, and then on each one of those we've got a small utility. Intimidated enemies, 5 rage whenever we Warcry, 5 rage whenever we Warcry, and this one has another 5 rage whenever we Warcry, though you could put something else here. This is just what I happen to roll. 15 I think is pretty overkill. It lets us stack rage really quickly, but it's just what I happen to roll, and it's too valuable to roll over, so fuck it, we're using 15 rage. And you can see that with this amount of rage, Berserk is going to last a very long time, because you'll top yourself up pretty routinely. And you do, as you can see, have 2 charges of Enduring Cry. That only happens if you don't have instant Warcry from the anoint over here. Since we can't get it because can't anoint without going for a Blight unique, then we don't have instant Warcry, and if you attach Second Wind, you do get 2 uses of Warcry. So there is some benefit there, but since it's not instant, you do have to pause to make your little Warcry, and you don't really want to put it on your left your mouse move, simply because it doesn't work very well if it's not instant. It makes clicking things and loot doors, that sort of stuff, very clumsy. So that's why we don't do it there. That's why we have it on E. That's the main bulk of stuff taken care of. Our large cluster jewels do a few fancy things as well. Overshock gets our biggest shocks up to 60% damage taken, so it's pretty valuable in this sort of a build, since that will happen fairly often. We then have Snowstorm, which is 10% of lightning as extra cold against chilled enemies. We have some cold damage to start with, largely from Herald of Ice. So you can see the cold damage isn't insignificant, 4,000 to 6,000. So typically things will be shocked, and then every time you hit them with that lightning damage that gets converted to cold, it's going to be even more for shocking. Disorienting Display for some additional blind, though not sure how often that's up. And then same thing over here, just grabbed Snowstorm again, and whatever else I could if I could, and that was Sadist. So that's the idea behind the large clusters, that's the idea behind our Warcry drills, and we freeze things thanks to Snowstorm pretty reliably. A lot of our life is coming from a Feast of Flesh over here, a Fettle over here, grabbed some resists on them as well, so I think I crafted all of these myself. Just grab some life sort of clusters, small clusters, keep alt-regaling some Fettles, some whatever these things are, Feast of Flesh, until you get some proper good resists or some small suffixes that you kind of like the look of, and eventually you get something useful. So we put another one there, and we will end up having like 5,500 life and a bit over 2,000 energy shield, and running with Devouring Diadem. We do have Eldritch Battery, so all of our mana becomes our energy shield, and then also Mind Over Matter means that we take some of our damage as energy shield. So in the end, it is a fairly tanky character. It's going to have like 7.5, maybe 8,000 effective HP. Our energy shield gets regenerated pretty quickly thanks to the Inquisitor ascendancy here, 200 per second. As well as that though, we do have quite a lot of on kill, 238 on killing a shocked enemy here, energy shield gained, and then Cinder Swallow itself gives you a lot of energy shield back on kill as well. But you do need a bit of fire damage somewhere, and I've done that just by crafting fire damage and lightning over here. So that's 10 to 15 fire damage, that's all we have throughout the entire build, and you can see that turns into 600 to 900 fire damage thanks to the huge effectiveness of scaling through Doryani's touch. The rest of the gear I think I pretty much crafted. Let's have a look. These I managed to kind of chaos spam and then had to annul, get a bit fancy. They are Hunter boots. We did want some Tailwind just to go a bit faster. Just a regular belt I bought for not that much. It's a couple of resists and reduced flask charges. So that is a very nice mod to be able to spam flasks a bit more. This is a temple chest I bought, which has % life, bit of ES, and then I attached life as extra max ES. That's where a lot of our energy shield is coming from. However, I'm going to look into using an impulsor because explosions are pretty damn nice on this build. Having the additional explosions might help overcome the sort of hit limit on enemies that I was talking about, but it's going to lose a lot of ES. So I'm going to see if that's worth it. It's probably not, but I'll look into it anyway. Devouring Diadem, that's where you put Blood and Sand, Herald of Ice, and Wrath, but over here I've got Herald of Thunder, Orb of Storms attached to Curse on hit, Assassin Mark, and Power Charge on crit. So we don't need an Assassin Mark ring. Got Assassin Mark coming from Herald of Thunder most of the time, but also manually from Orb of Storms for bosses. Since we don't really need to do anything with our 5 or 6 link in here, that's what we've ended up doing. Down here you got faster attacks, shield charge, summon Stone Golem, Ancestral War Chief. No Fortify attached to them. They're not really going to be hitting very often. You got Dash, Second Wind, and Enduring Cry down here. And it's a shield that just has 2 min frenzy charges, bit of life, bit of ES, and that's what we can manage on that one for now. I wanted double damage focus as a suffix, but I kind of need the resist at the moment, so can't justify that. And then since I got a shaped ring here with Catalyst, Fertile Catalyst attached to it, Chaos Spam till something decent happened. Actually, I think this was an Essence, the Lightning Damage Essence, then chucked on a Mark of the Elder, and that gives us a lot of damage. If you'd rather, you can smash an Elder and a Shaper Ring together before crafting it, and then your Mark of the Elder is going to take care of both stun and a lot of attack damage there. Currently, the way I'm dealing with stun, though, is 50% chance to avoid being stunned on boots, and then I've got Brian King over here, and in general, just try and kill things before they kill you. Pretty good plan. But stun can be a bit of an issue. There's another totally different way you can build this character. Instead of going all the way up here, you can go through this area down here, grab the Instant War Cry, you can grab Unwavering Stance, and just go heavy on life without as much on Eldritch Battery. I feel like that's a lot of information. Doryani's Fist, so far, it's pretty decent. We leveled with Ice Crash and Face Breakers up until level 63. I'm not sure I could really recommend you copy this sort of build because it is going to be tough to play, tough to build, but so far it's been pretty fun for me and rather satisfying to do. So if you're ballsy enough, you can, but if you aren't too sure, then it's going to be a tough one to sort of replicate, I think. because there can be some slow attack speed at times, and there can be some getting stunned. But if you figure those things out, get some good life, some good defenses, some good attack speed, crits, crit multis, all the good stuff, it's going to end up doing some pretty fun things to the bosses out there. And hopefully I'll do the exact same fun things to the end game later on today. Maybe the Simulacrum, maybe I'll get destroyed. Probably destroyed. Simulacrum gets you very overwhelmed very quickly, and if I can't fist things faster than I get overwhelmed, then it's going to be a problem. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.